Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast on Thursday evening, April 6th. The sun is shining. The NBA season is almost over. We have only a couple semi-meaningful games tonight. Most of the teams that are really playing for something are off tonight, so I thought it would be a good time to podcast. There's one exception. Oklahoma City, Utah is a massive, massive game for the Thunder, who are tied with the woe is us Dallas Mavericks, who, if the Thunder lose tonight in Utah, and the Thunder are kind of, you can see them running out of gas, the Mavericks will control their own destiny for the number 10 seed. All they would have to do is win their last two games, which are the Bulls, who are going to sit most likely everyone or lots of people, and then the Spurs. So Oklahoma City is in a borderline must-win tonight. Last night, the Battle of Los Angeles, streetlights versus spotlights, blacktop versus red carpet, whatever stupid metaphors the Clippers marketing team came up with 4 years ago, was kind of the Clippers mostly handled the Lakers pretty easily, shoving the Lakers likely into the play-in tournament and creating the possibility for some glorious last-minute seeding shenanigans in the Western Conference. A much smarter person than me is required to help me sort through all these scenarios, and so we have that person. Kevin Pelton, how are you?
When are they getting here?
They're here from Portland, where the Hoop Summit is taking place. How are you?
Yes, here with Bronny James, a number of NBA scouts, a number of media members. So doing well.
So Clippers beat the Lakers. Norm Powell, big game. Bones Highland, big game. Kawhi Leonard played 43 minutes, including the last 30 minutes of the game continuously. Here's where we stand. Seeds 1 and 4, Denver and Phoenix are locked in. Memphis and at 2 is almost locked in, which means Kings at 3 is almost locked in. 5 to 9, Clippers 42 and 38. They are fifth by virtue of the division record tiebreaker over the Warriors, who are also 42 and 38. The Lakers last night are now 41 and 39 after that loss last night. And the Pelicans, in a crazy comeback and then almost fall from ahead disaster against Memphis, which didn't seem like that big of a game for the wider playoff landscape, but had the Pelicans lost that game, the shenanigans for Phoenix avoidance, potential Phoenix avoidance, could have started this week in game 81 and now may have to wait until game 82, depending on the results of other games. And so here's where we are. The Lakers are very likely now going to have to go through the play-in tournament. They were on a back-to-back. They were tired coming off an overtime marathon against Utah in Utah the night before. What were your takeaways from that game, KP? And just sort of, catch me up. I haven't talked to you about either of the LA teams, both of which entered the season with pretty lofty ambitions and both of which are hovering around 500. What do we think of those teams as we near the end here?
I don't think what I think of those teams really changed much last night for the reasons you just mentioned. I looked at this yesterday going into the game. If you look at the record in the past decade of teams on a back-to-back that did not play overtime the night before, they've won 44% of the time. Teams that, like the Lakers, have played one overtime period have won 40% of the time, and it drops off from there. And that's, of course, talking about kind of all sorts of teams at all points of the season, not specifically a Lakers team where Anthony Davis has not played a back-to-back. I don't know when the last one he played was. LeBron James, obviously still coming back from this injury that he's been dealing with. Didn't look like himself in the first half.
Then he scored 30 in the second half.
Yeah. He it seemed for a moment like he was going to will the Lakers back in the game. Weren't able to do it because of the Bones Highland led bench explosion that you mentioned. I mean, I think if you're the Clippers, you have to feel good about the fact that they have managed to survive this period without Paul George. We'll see how much of the postseason that extends to. And unless they screw up their manipulation of the standings, they should comfortably be out of the play-in, which, to me is a pretty major dividing line. I mean, we've not yet seen a team come out of the play-in and make a run. Eventually, I suppose, over a long enough time period, it's bound to happen. But I feel like, if we go back to when the Lakers and Warriors, two of the teams we're still talking about now, were in the play-in tournament 2 years ago, I think that the chances of those teams making a run was a bit overstated. And I still feel that way because it's just such a challenge to have to win, at least one game, do or die, and then win 3 rounds on the road to potentially get to the finals.
So there is this debate in NBA media, Twitter discourse, because of the fear of the Suns, who have not lost a game with Kevin Durant, although let's just say they have not exactly played a murderer's row of teams with Kevin Durant, but it's Kevin Durant and they look pretty good. Would you rather have the 5th seed or the 7th seed? In other words, are you willing to risk shenanigans aiming at 6 and the Kings in the first round? Sorry, Kings. Awesome season. You definitely have a chance to win multiple playoff rounds. No one is saying that you don't. What we are saying is, faced with inexperienced playoff team, bottom 6 defense, Kings versus Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, we're taking the Kings if we can. So the dilemma is aim at 6 and misfire and end in the play-in tournament versus just accept your reality and be 5th. And I just don't think that's a real debate for the Clippers or for anybody else. I think the play-in is just viewed as such a dangerous crapshoot. The Clippers, especially having lost 2 play-in games last year, and the 5th seed is...
And just the wild card that the Clippers experienced, which was Paul George going into health and safety protocols. And look, maybe in a playoff series that's 7 games, you could survive that. In a one and done situation, that's it. Your season's over.
And so I don't think the risk is just too high. No one views that as a real debate. I don't think within the NBA, and nor should they. Like Karl Towns could hit 8 threes and all of a sudden your season's just over and that's it. And you're like, what the hell did we just do? We were that scared of Phoenix. I mean, you should be scared of Phoenix, but it's not like they look incredible. They're my pick to win the West as of right now. But, I just think you got to make the playoffs, get the home games, give yourselves a real chance rather than risk the play-in. However, KP, do you want to go over some shenanigans scenarios? And you have to just please listen because my brain is broken. Okay. My brain is broken going through this. Are you ready?
Okay.
The Pelicans and the Warriors. Pelicans are 41-39. What a job by the Pelicans, by the way. The last time you and I podcasted together, we talked about how the Pelicans offense had gone into the basement without Zion Williamson. And that's so weird because last year without Zion, this team was a legitimate threat to Phoenix in the first round. And boy, oh boy, have they turned things around and fought and fought and fought. And Brandon Ingram, if Brandon Ingram had played like he's played the last 15 games for 65 games this year, I think he'd make an all-NBA team.
Yeah, I mean, it turns out the solution was just Brandon Ingram make every shot he takes. That's a
good solution. And the passing he's had 4 double-digit assist games in the last 10, 12 games, whatever. Herb Jones has made enough threes. Trey Murphy, is he a most improved candidate to you? Trey Murphy, are you an anti-year 2 guy or no?
I'm not. I generally don't believe in putting criteria into awards that are not explicitly in the awards. So I don't think he would win it because I do think Lauri Markkanen in particular, just the magnitude of going from the level that he was at of, maybe 3rd or 4th NBA starter to all-star is a more important leap than the one that Trey Murphy III has made in his 2nd season. But he definitely deserves a lot of consideration, especially the way he just continues to expand his game over the course of the season.
Yes. I talked about his off the dribble stuff, catch and go, some floaters, all that stuff. Last episode, he's been fantastic. Okay. So New Orleans plays Friday. They play the Knicks, who are pretty much locked in, don't have much to play for. Let's say they lose. Let's just say they lose. For all this to come into play, the Pelicans need to lose on Friday. They're 41-40. They fall 2 games in the loss column behind the Clippers. The Warriors also play on Friday. They play the Kings, who are pretty much locked in too. Let's say the Warriors win. They're 43-38. The Clippers are off on Friday. They don't play till Saturday. They get to watch these two games and decide what to do with life. And they played the Blazers, who, God bless you if you can name the Blazers 10-man rotation right now. You might be able to, and that would, I would, Scott. It's the Skylar Mays show right now for the tanky Blazers, who have to deal with the embarrassment of doing this for the second year in a row. So, okay, that would be Pelicans 41-40, Warriors 43-38. If you're the Clippers, you go out and beat Portland. You're 43-38. You go into the last game of the season, 2 games up on the Pelicans. You have the tiebreaker with the Lakers, so it doesn't really matter what the Lakers do in this scenario. Don't have the tiebreaker with Minnesota, so they're a little bit of wild card. Let's put them over to the side. You go into the last.
But Minnesota already has 40 losses. So
they already have 40 losses
Clippers,
too, so they can be off to the side. Bye-bye. They go into the last day of the season with a 2-game cushion on the teams for whom they don't have the tiebreak, and tied 43-38 with the Warriors. It raises the possibility that they may try to tank their last game in an effort to drop below the Warriors into the 6th seed. However, the Clippers' last game is against none other than the Phoenix Suns. What if the Phoenix Suns decide, actually, Clippers, we'd like to play you. We're going to sit everybody, and we're going to have a good old-fashioned tank off. Meanwhile, the Warriors, knowing that they lose the tiebreaker against the Clippers, I believe they play at the same time on Sunday in the last game of the season. They play the Blazers, knowing that if they lose, they can control their own destiny to some degree and land in the 6th seed no matter what the Clippers do. I'm now rooting for the Knicks on Friday against the Pelicans, because all of this hinges on the Pelicans falling out of this derby by losing to the Knicks. We could have 2 all-time horrible/awesome tank offs on the last day of the season.
I mean, I gotta say, like, when you think of memorable games on the last day of the season, obviously the Timberwolves Nuggets game that was a de facto play-in before the play-in existed is high up on that list. I was at some Blazers game that night, so I didn't actually see that one. But the most memorable game in the last 3 years on the last day of the season was that Clippers Thunder game where both teams were trying to lose. The Thunder from a draft positioning perspective, the Clippers to try to lock in the playoff matchups that they desire and stay out of the Lakers potential bracket from the play-in, or from the first round at least. And no, I guess they got down to 4 or 5. So yeah, that I will always remember Daniel Oturu's post-ups from that game, and Alexei Pokashevsky playing point guard for the Thunder. Like, I guess if you're rooting for the most memorable, most meaningful Sunday, you have to hope that the Knicks win on Friday.
Now let's add layers to this. The Kings are 3-1 against the Clippers. Going back to my point of, like, be careful, just give the Kings their proper respect. They're fast. The speed annoys the Clippers. They're fast. They're relentless. They scored 176. The Clippers blew that game, but the Kings are fine, comfortable-ish playing the Clippers. There's also the potential, by the way, I checked with the NBA on this, a 3-way tie between the Pelicans, Warriors, and Clippers goes in order. Pelicans win it, then Warriors, then Clippers. For some reason that I don't care to understand. That's how the 3-way tie goes. This could be fun. It's probably going to be rendered all moot because the Pelicans will go all out and beat the Knicks, and then we'll just come down to game 82, and there will be no room for shenanigans because no one wants to take the risk of being the 7th seed. And by the way, Memphis, no one's really paid Memphis has kind of fallen out of the discourse a little bit because Morant's back. The suspension is over. There was a big new Washington Post story today that is incredibly troubling about Morant's non-Instagram live incidents, the one at the mall and the volleyball game and the pickup game, both being worse than has been previously reported, and implying very strongly that the police did not aggressively investigate them as they would have had they involved a non-celebrity alleged aggressor. Very troubling. And the credit to the Washington Post, they got the victims, the alleged victims in those incidents, to talk to them on the record, which is a rare thing. But Memphis has been playing really, really well. I thought they would feel the Steven Adams, Brandon Clark injuries a little bit more acutely, but Big Body Roddy just comes in and does stuff, and Kenneth Lofton Jr., who's just a delight in every possible way, comes in and does stuff. And Desmond Bane's playing great. Triple J's playing great. And they just keep winning. Like, they're no slouch at number 2 either. They're like as good as they were last year.
I mean, they're tops now in the Western Conference in point differential. I don't know that I read a lot into that, given the way that Denver has, approached this last stretch and has not necessarily had a ton to play for recently. But yeah, I even though I still think the 2-7-3-6 side of the bracket is the one you'd rather be on compared to the 1-1-8-4-5 that includes both Denver and Phoenix. Memphis specifically is not as attractive a first round opponent, especially when you factor in that you have to win a play-in game just to lock that in and avoid being in the 8th seed and facing Denver in the first round.
And obviously, as we mentioned, 10 is up for grabs in the West between the Thunder and the Mavericks. I outlined that before. The plot twist there is the Knicks are rooting very hard for the Mavericks to get into the playoffs. And so they get the Mavericks top 10 protected pick instead of having it roll over and giving the Mavericks a chance to sort of revamp their team into a better team. One hell of a media availability by Mark Cuban yesterday. Just an all-timer, showing text messages between him and his GM describing the thought process relayed to them by Aaron Mintz, one of Jalen Brunson's agents at CAA, during the Jalen Brunson kerfuffle, implying, without really explaining why, as far as I know, that the Mavericks did not have an opportunity to sign Jalen Brunson to the 4-year, $55 million extension he was eligible for at various points. Didn't really get that. And then blaming Rick Brunson and Jalen's parents for Jalen's defection to the Knicks. Just an all-time epic media availability, followed by today, the NBA officially declaring null and void the Mavericks protest of the Warriors loss a couple weeks ago. Did you expect that protest to be successful, Kevin? I know you rigorously analyzed this. You went into the litigation, you read the briefs, white shoe law firms were involved. Did you expect a different outcome? Is this, let me ask it like this. Is this a gross miscarriage of justice in your view?
I don't think it is. We have win probability. Maybe we need protest probability as well so that we can assess the chance of it. I mean, obviously, when you look at the base rate of the fact that we haven't had a successful protest since 2006, 2007, whatever year that was, the odds are inherently pretty low that any of those are going to succeed. And the fact that in this case, there didn't seem to be a clear rule that was misapplied. Like, even the Mavericks argument boiled down to, well, you should have told us. And that's like, a principle rather than a rule. That's a very different thing.
The refs definitely should have assessed the situation and said, this is strange. We don't really think it's sound strategy for one team to concede a basket to the other team by having no player nearby any other players.
Even Vivek never suggested 5-on-0.
Even Vivek Ranadive, 4-on-5. Let's give it a shot. Cherry picker, waiting. Never suggested that. The refs definitely should have stopped the game and be like, does everyone understand what's going on here? Because but they didn't, and the protest was lost anyway. And so the Mavericks are here having to root really hard for the Utah Jazz, who have nothing to play for. But Utah Jazz with nothing to play for have been playing really damn hard, and Colin Sexton's back and he's got like stuff to play for. He wants to get back in his rhythm, and Agbaji has gotten tons of minutes. Taylor Horton-Tucker has turned into like Magic Johnson or something in the last 2 weeks. Like, they're playing hard.
Definitely. I mean, that was a thrilling game between them and the Lakers that took so much out of the Lakers going into last night's matchup with the Clippers. Horton-Tucker, it seems to validate, like, my thought always was the reason it didn't work in LA was because he needs the ball in his hands to be successful. And that's just not going to happen when you're playing with LeBron James. And, through 2/3 of the season, it was looking like, well, nope, going to have to take the L on that theory. And then finally in this last stretch where he has effectively been playing a lot of point guard, it has come around.
Yeah, I feel a little bit redeemed, and I've been texting with some people close to him about this. He was in my 6 most intriguing players column two seasons ago, and obviously there was nothing intriguing about what happened in Los Angeles between that column and the trade. but he's got skill and craft. Anyway, enough Utah. I can't believe we're talking about
we got also got to get a shout out to Luka Šamanić on a 10-day as guardian LeBron.
Hrvatska's own Luka Šamanić. I know the town where Luka Šamanić is from, and I visited the town, and many people asked me how I thought Luka Šamanić would do in the NBA, and their assumption was he would be like amazing because everyone roots so hard for the Croats, and I was like, I don't know, we'll see how he does, and so far not so good, but yeah,
still time.
Okay, that's the West playoff picture. Have you? The last time I had you on, I think I made you make a Nerf gun to the head pick for like based on what we know today, who's winning the West. Well, here's what's changed since then. Durant's back, Paul George is out, and we don't know when he's going to come back. If they even advance around, would he come back? Would he come back in the middle of the first? We don't know. And Andrew Wiggins is back, but missing the last 2 games of the regular season, so he will not play a game until the postseason. Thoughts with Andrew Wiggins' family? It's a bad situation. It's been a tough situation. Has your answer then was Denver just based on number 1 seed, home court? If every team has like some plurality chance of winning the West, if it's that open, just go with the top seed. That's by default. Is that still where your head is at?
I think we are in the same position because you said earlier that the Suns were your pick to win the Western Conference, and I think they are mine now as well. And I think probably for the same reason that number 1, we just got clarity on Durant's return and his ability to get in a few games prior to the postseason. So the Suns are not going in with 3 games together as a unit. And then secondly, the fact that it related to Durant coming back, they have stabilized in the 4 seed, are going to have home court advantage in a round, and not have to face as difficult a path as they potentially could. I mean, we'll see. It could still swing. I don't like the matchup against the Warriors nearly as much for them as I like the matchup against the Clippers, even if both of those look like challenging first round foes for a team with home court advantage. But right now I would lean very slightly towards Phoenix.
Yeah, I agree with you. My biggest concern, my biggest concern about picking any team in the West is that none of these teams have stood out really at all, and Phoenix has not had an opportunity to really mark itself as a juggernaut with Durant. But my other biggest concern is whether if it's Clippers or Warriors, and the chances are now very good it's going to be one of those 2 teams. Those are going to be tough matchups. Now, the Clippers without Paul George they're deep. They can play all sorts of different lineups. They have no idea what to do with Robert Covington still, who plays 27 minutes one game and then 0 minutes the next game. I don't know what the hell is going on there, but they're still good. And the Warriors, look, I don't get the road thing at all. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. I literally just, other than the opponent 3-point shooting, I have no idea what's going on with them on the road. I've said all year, and I'm sticking by it. The data suggests if they ever get whole and stay whole, and by whole, I mean the starting 5 that has kicked butt now in not a big sample size because Wiggins has been out so long, and then the first 3 off the bench of Poole, DiVincenzo, Kuminga, and then Peyton as well is there, and they have to mix in a lot of guards now, which I don't love. I think that team can beat anybody. I think that team can win the championship. I'm not saying they will. I'm not saying they will beat Phoenix in the first round. I think they're capable of it, and I can tell you for sure. Now, this is pre-Durant. When it was Paul and Booker, they felt confident we can switch our way to smothering their pick and roll attack. The Warriors know better than anyone that Durant is a one-man anti-switch device who will destroy almost any defense. That series, as a non-partisan, that's a big DeAndre Ayton series. That would be a really interesting series for him to see. Can he exploit small ball lineups at all? Can he beat switches? Can he punish the Warriors for playing Draymond at center and switching assignments and all that? That would be a fun series. It would also scare me as a Suns fan.
Yeah, I think there are 2 elements of that would be highly anticipated. we thought this time last year we are going to get a Warriors Suns showdown in the Western Conference Final. Sorry Memphis, which had home court advantage looking ahead to their matchup against Golden State, but then Phoenix's collapse at the end of that series against Dallas prevented it. And then also seeing Kevin Durant go up against the Warriors in the playoffs after playing there, after their classic matchup in the 2016 conference finals, would be tremendously fun. So, I'm with you that I think that would be the most entertaining possible matchup, but I also, in some ways, having that in the first round, it's like that's not right. That shouldn't be a first round matchup.
Hey, it happens. You play the first 82 for a reason.
Clippers Spurs
to avoid stuff. Yeah, to avoid that was Clippers Spurs 2015, I think. The Chris Paul almost buzzer beater to win Game 7. That Game 7, these first round games are just so many games, and the stakes are not low, but just by default not as high as they are in the later rounds. That Game 7 is one of my favorite games of all time, and that series is one of my favorite series of all time. And I think it took a lot out of the Clippers because that was the year they blew the Houston series and blew Game 6 specifically in the next round. Yeah, another subplot of that is I'm sure Durant would lead the league in being annoyed by having to answer question after question about the Warriors and his tenure with the Warriors and his decision to go to the Warriors and all that. I think he would be very annoyed. I will have to admit too, I think I have some Grizzlies Warriors fatigue. I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm ready yet. Like if it happens in the later rounds, that's fine. I'm kind of tired of the chirping and the chattering, and I have a little bit of fatigue on that one.
Yeah, I think we could see some other matchups with the Grizzlies that would be pretty fun. I mean, Grizzlies Lakers obviously has its own share of chirping. In that case, it's from the sidelines.
Oh God. Okay. Today is Thursday. I believe Sixers Celtics was Tuesday or Monday. It doesn't matter. I think Tuesday. Let me tell you how that afternoon began for me, Mr. Pelton, because I want to talk about awards a little bit. I was talking to a coach who shall not be named. We were just shooting the breeze about playoff matchups and how the season was going and how this person's team was feeling about itself. And as one does, I said, I'm just curious, who would you vote for MVP? And he said, this is hours before Embiid erupts. And I mean erupts for 52 points on 20 of 25 shooting, which is like not even a real thing to shoot 20 of 25 in an NBA game. That's like a fake thing. Nobody does that. And this coach said, I'm still really annoyed that he sat against Jokic. Like he said, if I were in your shoes, I'm not saying that would be like a tiebreaker for me, but that just really did not sit well with me. Didn't sit well. You handed it to him. He handed it to him when he played head to head in Philly. And this is the coach talking. So, it just felt like, well, now I'm playing with house money. Instead of saying now I'm playing with house money, I'm just not going to risk anything. I'm going to take a low risk approach and not even play him this time around. I didn't like that. And I thought, because I hadn't decided, I have been undecided the whole year. You and I did an MVP podcast 20 games into the season and both picked Steph Curry at that point as our MVP. And I thought, it's interesting. I mean, I respect this guy's opinion a lot. This is what I do. I talk to lots of people. It's interesting that I wouldn't think of this person as someone that game would stick in his craw, so to speak, an expression I have no idea what that means. And then hours later, Embiid has one of the games of the season, just an absolutely majestic performance against the Celtics. And majestic is a word I've used to describe him a lot because he's a Goliath, and the way he just lords over the game from the free throw line, his footwork, his soft touch, it's majestic. And it was a nice bookend to, in November, he had 59 points and 7 blocks against Utah, which at that point was kind of the performance of the season for him. So he's got one of these crazy games early, one of these crazy games late. The odds of the MVP swung like dramatically based on this one game. The Nuggets, meanwhile, I think I would classify them as having won 2 meaningful games. And by meaningful, I mean like against good teams. and they played well since March 3rd when they beat the Grizzlies to give themselves a 5-game cushion in the Western Conference. And one of those meaningful games was against the Warriors without Jokic. So Jokic has appeared in one like actual good win since March 3rd, and that was against the Bucks in Denver with Milwaukee on a back-to-back, but playing well. And Milwaukee's played really well on back-to-backs all season, and Denver crushed them, and Jokic was amazing. You have a ballot. Have you made your decision yet? The information is in. This, like, we're waiting to the wire. Now, that doesn't mean we've all looked at all the available information. I'm still going to talk to people, look at more information. But all these seeds are Denver's locked in, Milwaukee's locked in with Giannis, Philly's locked in. None of them have anything left to play for. The games are in. The information's in. Now it's verdict time. Do you have a verdict yet?
I am still going with Jokic, even though I fully expect Embiid to win at this point. I mean, that was kind of my takeaway from the last Bontemps BS poll on ESPN by our colleague Tim Bontemps. The fact that Embiid was still narrowly ahead of Jokic, even if it was by as slim of a margin as it was, which I think was 2 points. The fact that in the immediate aftermath of Embiid not playing that game in Denver, it still wasn't enough to push Jokic ahead of Embiid, suggested to me that, kind of the direction it was going to go the rest of the season was, in Embiid's direction, both in this case because he's continued to play and has played really well, and also because just over time, I think that factor of we'd rather give it to a player who has not won previously rather than a player that has won the last two would serve as a tiebreaker.
What's your case for Jokic?
So it's interesting.
I know what the guy voted for Jokic twice. I'm a true believer in Nikola Jokic. What's your case for Jokic?
So I don't know if you've watched this guy play. He's a really good passer. You should check him out sometime. No, I mean, it's interesting because it's different than the last couple of years because the volume element no longer favors Jokic. Embiid has played 43 fewer minutes at this point. So, less than one full game, it's basically a tie from that standpoint. And the question is one of performance. So I suppose we should talk about why the advanced value metrics still suggest that Jokic has been more valuable this season. I think there's a few reasons that are interesting to unpack there. I know Joe said recently he wasn't sure why Jokic was rated as highly defensively as he is. And I agree that one with Raptor in particular, which has him as the second best defensive player among high minutes players in the league, is a little tough to understand.
Raptor, to be clear, is 538's all-in-one metric encapsulating both offense, defense, and total player value. And I'm going to be candid with you. I have no earthly clue what in the hell is going on there because Jokic is rated, as you said, the second best defender in the NBA, which is horse poo-poo. And he's like not quite double anybody else in total Raptor in the NBA. But when I do my Vorps and Schnorps spreadsheet, it spits out that Jokic is like ahead by a significant amount of margin when you sum all of them up and all that. And almost all of that is 538 and the on-off numbers, which we're going to talk about. So I've got no clue what's going on there. And I agree with Joel Embiid, but please, before you continue, I should say there's a third candidate who's averaging like 32, 12, and 5 playing for the top seed Bucks. I think he's equally viable. I think this is a 3-man, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, if you want to split it that way, race. I don't really get why he's a distant third, except the minutes gap, which for an award of this is the award. Minutes, look, everything's up to every individual voter. There's no criteria yet until the NBA imposes this games played criteria on voters. The minutes matter to me more for some awards than others, none more so than most valuable player. And there's a 250, 300 minute-ish gap, I think, between Giannis and the two centers. That's meaningful to me. But please continue and make the case for the big fella in Denver.
Yeah, I mean, so value is literally in the name of this award, and value is a combination of how well you play relative to replacement level and how many minutes you play. So yeah, that's a big factor in it. And as I wrote about a few weeks ago in a mailbag, even though Giannis is putting up the best season of his career in terms of his box score stats, it is not close to his best MVP seasons in terms of the advanced stats, because his efficiency has not been as good as those years. And the standard is much higher now because the league-wide efficiency has jumped, even as compared to prior to the pandemic shutdown in that 2019-20 regular season that he most recently won for. So Jokic and Embiid, I mean, I think, so even if you don't view Jokic as that kind of defender, like, one of the things that I sometimes try to do with MVP, I wrote about this back during the Russell Westbrook MVP year, is go through some of the advanced stats, look at what makes sense to me and what doesn't across all of them, and kind of make my estimate. And I don't think, Jokic, I think you can make a case that he might be above average among all players as a defender, maybe not above average as a center, but you can't make a case that he's that elite. But what happens, I think, sometimes at the other end is we kind of simplify it to, well, these guys are all really good offensively, and therefore they're kind of tied, and defense is what makes the difference. And that's one reason a lot of people will vote for Giannis or Joel Embiid, is that they are better defenders than Jokic. I don't think that's accurate this year. I think Jokic is in a different stratosphere with what he's doing offensively, because of the fact that he is such a hub, not only as a highly efficient scorer at a lower usage rate than years past, but also with his playmaking. I think he's more in the category of a Stephen Curry or a Damian Lillard. And that's, again, something the advanced stats say. And one element of that Seth Partnow, our buddy and guest on this pod, wrote about a few weeks ago in the Dunked On newsletter, is that if you—
what a nerdy sentence that just was. That was like the nerdiest sentence, all of it put together, ever uttered on this podcast, coming from a semi-nerd at the very least.
Anyway, what Seth wrote about was that if you kind of look at turnovers based on what you would expect from a player's role in their offense, that even given their high usage rates, Giannis and Joel Embiid are relatively high turnover players, which makes sense. They're 6'11" and 7 feet tall. Like, that's the reason the small guys handle the ball. It's much easier for them. Even relative to what he's doing, is also a 7-footer. Nikola Jokic has a below average turnover rate than expected. And I think that's something that, is hard to tell with the eye test, because you can't see something that doesn't happen, basically. And it's the turnovers that don't happen for Jokic that are part of what separates him offensively and puts him, I think, enough ahead of them offensively to compensate for the fact that he's behind them defensively.
And by the same token, you sometimes wave away turnovers by high usage players as just sort of the price of doing business. Like, this is just baked into their role. This is what happens. They turned it over. Who cares? He had 4 turnovers and 4 assists. No big deal. Part of the reason why advanced stats love, for instance, Jimmy Butler so much more than traditional numbers, which really like Jimmy Butler, but advanced metrics paint Jimmy Butler as like a top 10 player in the league year after year after year, even when he scores 21 points a game, is that he doesn't turn the ball over ever. He gets a million free throws and he doesn't turn the ball over.
And gets a lot of steals.
And gets a lot of steals too, which are super valuable without gambling. Part of Jokic's efficiency this year, and I agree with you, like, I think there is something very difficult to quantify, at least in traditional means, and something just so catalytic about his playmaking that it's hard to measure how powerful it is and the effect it has on the collective ecosystem in Denver. Denver, by the way, ranks 5th in offensive efficiency. The Sixers rank 2nd. Part of Jokic's efficiency argument is that he's shooting 63% overall, 6'3", 68% on twos. I think the Embiid backers would say, well, that's because he's so choosy. His usage rate is so much lower than Embiid's, and he's taking X shots per 36 minutes. I don't know what it is, but it's not a high number for an MVP candidate. So he's doing his version of the thing when LeBron got to Miami and he was like, I want to shoot 58% from the floor. I'm just going to take dunks and layups and all the best shots. What is your counter? And Embiid doesn't have perhaps the luxury of being so choosy, even though if you stacked up their supporting casts, I think probably most observers would take Phillies over Denver's. I actually think that argument is much closer than the people who just sort of throw away Denver supporting cast think it is. I think it's much closer. But what is your counter to that argument of that Jokic is being finicky and propping up his shooting efficiency as a result?
Yeah, I mean, look, a well-calibrated all-in-one metric should account for that. There is obviously a benefit to higher usage, all other things equal. And, I think, again, if you isolated the scoring element, it would probably be relatively close between, these three. Giannis a little bit behind this season because, again, he hasn't been as efficient, but has played the highest usage role of these three. And it's the playmaking that separates them offensively. And I guess that's the other piece of it is like, look, it's one thing if you're refusing to ever shoot and your team is struggling to score as a result of it. But if you're shooting infrequently because of the fact that you're diming up Aaron Gordon all the time at the rim, like that's in a different matter entirely. And, Denver's offense being where it is, I mean, I haven't looked specifically at the on-court offensive ratings for Embiid and Jokic specifically, but I would
Do you like them?
Go for it.
The Nuggets with Nikola Jokic on the floor are scoring 124 points per 100 possessions, which would lead the NBA by acres and acres and acres in team level offense. No offense is over 120. The Kings lead the league at 119.1. The Sixers with Embiid on the floor are scoring 119 points per 100 possessions, so the equivalent of the best offense in the entire NBA. I think what those numbers are saying is like they both. What is Dwayne Casey's thing about the cat? There's multiple ways to skin the cat. Like whatever way they're skinning the cat for their teams, it's working. Like those teams are machines when they're on the floor. Offensively, Denver is a little bit more efficient of a machine with Jokic on the floor than the Sixers are with Embiid on the floor. But we're just talking at this point about degrees of amazingness. Like with Jokic on the floor, the Nuggets are about plus 11.5 per 100 possessions overall. With Embiid on the floor, it's about plus 9.5. It's like, fine. 11.5 is bigger than 9.5. They're both amazing. Their teams are amazing when they play. And so, yeah, I would agree with you that the counter to the finicky argument is, well, whatever he's doing, whatever passing scoring balance he has chosen this season is working like gangbusters for the Nuggets.
Yeah, it's most valuable player, not only valuable player award. And look, I mean, you watch Embiid on a night like Tuesday night when he has it going, and Boston, a team that traditionally has defended him pretty well. I mean, maybe not as well as the reputation, but
yeah, I said that on NBA Today, by the way. We did a whole segment that day before the game. Zach, why do you think the Celtics have Embiid's number? And I said, my first response was, I am dismissing the whole question. I don't really think the Celtics have Embiid's number in a meaningful way. Yes, they're 1-8 in the playoffs against Boston. 5 of those games were in 2019 or 8, I think 2019. And 4 of them were in the bubble when Ben Simmons didn't play, and like Al Horford and Josh Richardson were on the Sixers. Like I'm just dismissing it. Yes, Grant Williams is annoying and Al Horford is annoying to Embiid. Like he's fine against the Celtics. And I said that day, if you're a Boston fan and you're like, we got this in the second round, like we got this. This is a non-threat to us because of our regular season record and old playoff record against the Sixers. I would check that sentiment at the door. I don't think you got this with that dude playing like this. If Harden's Achilles calf, whatever the hell we're talking about now, allows him to perform at like B+ James Harden level.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the better way to put it is, look, Boston is one of the league's better defensive teams. They have a number of great individual defenders. They had zero answer for Embiid in the mid to high post, just isolating and knocking down jumper. Because who has an answer to that? I mean, it's a 7-footer doing that. Like that's what Kevin Durant does. That's what makes him so amazing. But Embiid is doing that with all the other center attributes that he brings to the table.
And Boston's whole thing is, so I think that Harden has made Embiid's life easier. Having one of the great pick and roll passers has just produced these buckets that didn't really exist for him before. He's been able to migrate from, oh man, I got to roll over people in the post over and over again. This is his least post touches in any season of his career is this season, because like I can just screen. I don't even have to roll that hard. I like it when he mixes in some hard rolls, but if I just sort of drift down to 12 feet and catch there, it's done. It's money. It's a 55, 60% shot if he's open. And Boston's whole thing is you don't get to make those catches. We're not letting you make those catches. If that means we give Harden more of a driving lane and dare him to beat us at the rim, we're going to do that some. If that means we have to switch, we're going to do that some. If that means we have to switch and then scram our little guy out and have a switch behind the switch, we're going to do that. If that means we leave PJ Tucker and Tyrese Maxey open or semi-open or whatever, we're going to swarm you and do that. And he put up 52 points anyway against them. It was really incredible. And it's funny you bring up Westbrook. It reminded me of Westbrook's game against Denver in 2017 when he hit a buzzer beater and broke the triple-double record in the same game. And the MVP race ended that night for a lot of voters. And I think the MVP race ended the other night for a lot of voters. Not for you, maybe not for me. Can I make the Embiid case?
Of course.
This is Embiid's best offensive season ever. He's shooting 55% and 58% on twos. 58% on twos. I think his passing has improved throughout the course of the season, and in particularly just zeroing in on the last 2 weeks. I think he had 6 assists against Boston, and he got PJ Tucker all those corner threes late in the game. I thought in the last 2 weeks, I don't know if somebody said something to him, if he read something, if he's hearing all this stuff about Jokic's passing, or Michael Pina wrote a wonderful piece for The Ringer about how Embiid handles double teams differently than Jokic. Jokic views them as an opportunity to pass right away. And Embiid kind of likes to hold the ball and sometimes force it. You know who he handles double teams like, by the way? It struck me watching Clippers-Lakers last night. He handles double teams like Kawhi or Kobe Bryant. He handles double teams like, I'll let you come over here. You can come over here. Come on. And I'm going to read the floor and I'm going to watch. I'm going to look at the rotations behind this double team, and I may just shoot over it, or I may just see if the doubler will go back on a pass fake, and then I can drive to the rim. He reminds me of like a wing in the way he handles those double teams. But I think his passing's been better. And I know Jokic has had his best offensive season ever, but I think if there was a gap on offense between them, I think it has shrunk a little bit this year relative to where it has been in prior years. And I think the gap on defense has widened. I think this has been Jokic's worst defensive season in a few years. In the last 2 months, the first month he was completely out of it. And that's when I first wrote about his kickballs and how he was just waving at shots at the rim and like not even really bothering to contest them. And the last month, same thing. And as we're going to talk about, maybe the most difficult individual award for me this whole entire season is Defensive Player of the Year. It would be much easier if Jaren Jackson Jr. had like 300 more minutes, but he doesn't. Not saying I'm not going to vote for him. I'm just saying it would be easier to just be like, obviously he's the best defender in the NBA. And I've had a number of people in front offices and coaching staff ask me if you consider Embiid. Like, I think Embiid has a case for Defensive Player of the Year. I can't go there. That's too far for me. I don't think his effort is consistent enough for me to put him in that conversation, but he's obviously very good defensively. He makes 15 defensive plays every game that Jokic could never make. Some of them are like possession, bailout, saving blocks. And the fact that these people who know more about me than about basketball, more than me about basketball, who live in the game, are nominating Embiid as consideration for Defensive Player of the Year means something to me. And I guess that's the case. The offensive gap is closed. The defensive gap to me has widened. And Embiid's team is just as good, if not better, than the Nuggets. Is there anything else?
I mean, look, as we started with, the volume element was a big part of this argument in years past in Jokic's favor and is not anymore. I mean, I think the Embiid Defensive Player of the Year element is interesting because, you know, you go back a couple of years ago when the heated Defensive Player of the Year debate, and it's always heated, isn't it? Because it's so difficult to parse out, as you said, was Ben Simmons. And you looked at the numbers and it seemed more clear that Joel Embiid had a more consistent impact year over year on the Sixers defense than Simmons did, just because of the nature of interior defense versus perimeter defense.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Ben Simmons later. The other thing, you know, I've gone back and forth on this. I've been surprised by how many of the most rational, analytical, unemotional, unmoved by narrative, storytelling, emotion, any of these subjective things that influence this debate. I've been shocked at how many of them around the league, within teams, people I talk to, really believe in a way that has influenced my thought process at least a little bit, really believe that this award is of such a magnitude in the history of the NBA that the standards for a three-peat should be even higher than they are for someone to win twice or the first time. That if you're gonna win 3 times in a row, the standards for that third one are higher. Some people, when they say that, mean the standards of what you do in that particular regular season have to be so incredible to really blow away the field. Some percentage of those people think Jokic has checked that box. Some do not. Some of those people, by standards, mean you need to have accomplished enough in the playoffs that you're in like the upper echelon of all-time players already. And by that logic, to those people, Jokic isn't quite there. And there are more people than I expected who are, some of them are analytics people who I think of as like the most rational people in the league, who have said to me, I do think the standard should be higher for a three-peat, just as it was for Giannis when he didn't win the third year in a row after the Bucks had not yet won a title and all that stuff. I give that argument more credence today than I did 3 months ago, because I keep hearing it from smart people.
I mean,
smart people who care about the game.
I think the fact that it has been established is at least a storyline. It's not like this is something that just came up when Giannis was going for a third or Jokic was going for a third. It was kind of a concept that was already out there beforehand. Makes it probably more difficult to sway in people's minds. I mean, look, this is a totally subjective thing. There's not a wrong opinion on what goes into determining most valuable in any given season or considering the historical significance or legacy of it. It's not something I'm going to factor in. And I do think for most people, it's probably more of the tiebreaker element, which is why Jokic looked like the favorite a couple months ago before Embiid's strong finishing kick and Jokic missing some time. And it's only, I think, Embiid has played his way into making it a factor in the race, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it's all contingent on like the other rivals have to measure up, and these two rivals have measured up. But I'll finish with this: win or lose, and I think Joel Embiid is going to win. I guess we won't know officially until later in the postseason, but now all the people count the votes and people publish their votes, so we'll probably know-ish. I said this before the season in talking about the Sixers and why I believed in the Sixers as a not title favorite, but for sure title contender. Because I don't think they're as good as Boston, and I don't think they're as good as Milwaukee, but I damn well think they can beat those teams in a playoff series if they play really, really well, get a break or two. We've been waiting on the epic Embiid postseason run for a long time. It hasn't happened yet. In fact, I think he's been probably slightly underproductive by his standards in the postseason versus the regular season. And I said before the season, if they keep getting in and they keep getting high seeds, that run is coming. The run where he doesn't suffer a fluke injury and just has games like he did the other night, maybe not 50-point games, but asserts his presence as, I'm the most important guy in this series. Not Kawhi Leonard when back in the Raptors series, maybe not even Giannis for 4 and 7, not Jason Tatum, me. And I'm going to will us to at least game 7 of this series or whatever it is. That's coming. And I just as a fan, I hope it comes this year. And if he wins the MVP and it doesn't come, the same scrutiny that all the Philly fans have been throwing at Jokic all year long, a guy who's gotten further than the Sixers have gotten in the playoffs since Allen Iverson was in Philly, that's coming. Can I ask you about a couple other awards that I'm having problems with?
So I haven't spent as much time on these awards, but we can talk them through.
Defensive Player of the Year. Is it just no brainer, Jaren Jackson Jr. to you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, from the volume standpoint, and then from Brook Lopez's importance to the Milwaukee defense that's constructed around him, I don't think he's as singularly important to Milwaukee as Jaren Jackson Jr. is perhaps to Memphis, because we've seen what the Memphis defense looked like without Jaren Jackson Jr. in the first part of the season. But I think those two in particular are both in consideration in my mind, and I haven't dug deep into the stats to separate them.
What do you think of Evan Mobley?
I think he's still a level below them in this question, I would say.
So I keep hearing that from people around the league because I'm flirting with a Mobley defensively. He's on my short list of, like, if there are 4 guys I could plausibly vote number 1 for this award, he's one of them. I saw Joe Varden in The Athletic announced he is voting for Evan Mobley for Defensive Player of the Year. I just think he's unbelievable. Probably the first month of the season, he was not quite up to the standard he's at now. Maybe the first 6 weeks. He's not as physically strong as Jaren Jackson Jr. Like, you can nudge Evan Mobley out of the way at the rim in a way that you cannot with Jaren Jackson Jr. or Brook Lopez or Bam Adebayo, who I don't think is going to be on the short list for this award this year. The advanced metrics don't love Evan Mobley. They just like him. I think something is wrong with those advanced metrics, because I watch him. I'm like, this guy is unbelievable. He can switch. He can protect the rim. He blocks shots out of nowhere. He is rock solid in his rotations. He does not make mistakes. And he's played a crap ton of minutes for the number 1 defense in the NBA. And people are going to look at the on-off numbers and say, well, they're slightly better with Evan Mobley off the floor. I don't care, because with Evan Mobley on the floor, they are the number 1 defense in the NBA.
Oh, well, if you go to the luck adjusted RAPM on NBAshotscharts.com, like, he comes out right near the top of the league in terms of on-off impact. So I don't think that should be the argument. He's number 1, in fact.
So what am I missing?
I think it's the fact that his rim protection numbers aren't at the same level as those 2 guys, and that is the more consistent, more stable element of defense. It sort of undercuts the argument I just made that, the adjusted plus minus is what's going to be picking up the value of switching and the value of versatility. But, like, he's a tiny bit ahead of Jaren Jackson Jr. in that metric. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a lot ahead in the ones that, value kind of the box score element of defense.
Going to be a tight race. If that one, I guess there's no more information for that one. I just have to make a decision. It's one of these hard to quantify things. Is like, I think Jaren Jackson is, by a non-trivial margin, the best per minute defender of the NBA. So it's like value times minutes equals this, whereas Mobley's value times minutes equals this. There's no final answer to that question. Mobley obviously has like 1,000 more minutes than Jaren Jackson Jr. And then there's Brook Lopez, who's been unbelievable, particularly in the last 3 months. And by the way, unbelievable on offense too. Like, really, really great season for Brook Lopez. I think Draymond Green has a case, and we can go on and on. I'll just say this now. This is all defense. I got to find my list of people. The number of names that are in contention for the forward spots on all defense: Mobley, Jaren Jackson Jr., Giannis, Draymond Green, who's eligible at center too, Jaden McDaniels, OG Anunoby. It's going to be like, there are going to be names, Mikal Bridges. There are going to be names that don't make it, where you're like, oh my God, this guy didn't make all defense. It's just too crowded.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've heard this about Jaden McDaniels in particular. Like, well, he's going to be first team. Like, take that for granted. Like,
he's not going to be. I'll tell you this: he's not going to be first team on my ballot, because my first team forwards are going to be Giannis and well, we'll see. Giannis, some combination of Giannis, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Evan Mobley are going to be my first team forwards.
I mean, I think the guard line is really difficult as well, in terms of, maybe not quite as great a season from Marcus Smart as we saw last year when he won Defensive Player of the Year and some of the old standbys. But then you've got, Alex Caruso has I think a strong case to be in there. Dylan Brooks, you look at his on-off impact, it's nearly as significant as Jaren Jackson Jr.'s in Memphis. There's some interesting battles there as well.
So I've got 6 total front court slots between Giannis, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brooke Lopez, Jaden McDaniels, OG Anunoby, Evan Mobley, Bam Adebayo, Draymond Green, Nick Claxton, and you can probably go on from there. And I say 6 front court ones because a couple of these guys are going to be eligible at forward and center. But Anthony Davis, I think, deserves consideration too, even though he's going to get to like whatever 50 whatever games he's played. He's been unbelievable. I've had people make the case for him as defensive player of the year. And so it's going to be tight. It's going to be tight. So rookie of the year. I mentioned before the podcast that I have typecast you as a Walker Kessler voter, and my typecasting was correct. Let me ask you this. I'm just looking up numbers. Hold on.
Well, your typecasting was correct in terms of, you and Chris Herring had a conversation about rookies a few weeks ago and mentioned Kessler prominently in the rookie of the year conversation to be on a spot on the ballot. And I do feel like I haven't decided who I'm going to pick, but I do think I was the only person outside the state of Utah who listened to that conversation. It was like, you guys shortchanged Walker Kessler.
So I'm not going to vote for Walker Kessler. Walker Kessler will finish 3rd on my rookie of the year ballot, and he should be a unanimous first team, all rookie, whatever. My first team all rookie is likely going to be Walker Kessler, Jalen Williams, Oklahoma City wing Jalen Williams, Paolo Banchero. I'm gonna grandfather in Mathurin despite the late season slump, and Keegan Murray. That's likely going to be my first team all rookie. But anyway, I read Michael Pina's awards column with great curiosity today because I respect him. I know how much he watches the league, and it had a line in there. This is just similar to what I talked about with Russillo and Simmons this week. The line was something like, I don't care that Paolo Banchero is shooting 29.8% on threes and 47% on twos. I don't care, the line was, because of all the other stuff he does. He's a really good passer. He's like top 12 in the league in free throws. He's the number 1 option on a team that is, I think, something like 28 and 24 in its last 52 games, like a legit decent team. Am I allowed to care a little bit that he's shooting 47% on twos and 29.8% on threes? Like, can I just not wish those are bad shooting numbers? I'm just not allowed to care at all? And specifically, I'm not allowed to care at all that Jalen Williams is shooting 36% on threes and 58% on twos. Like, can I? And I know the context. I know that he's not the number 1 option. SGA, who's going to be on my first team all NBA, is the number 1 option. Got it. I know Orlando has been just as good by record, if not by point differential and actual quality, as the Thunder over the last 50 games. So you can't really use winning as like a big dramatic cudgel in this award. But I'm just not allowed to care at all that the shooting differentials are that big, especially since the passing numbers are about the same. And I think Jalen Williams is like a better defender by some degree than Paolo Banchero. I just don't get like, oh, it doesn't matter that he's shooting 29.8% on threes and 47% on twos. Why am I not allowed to care about it? I don't get it.
I feel like there's this interesting thing, and we've talked about it before. I think it was, this was slightly different. We talked about it with Patrick Williams, where rookies basically, like, a lot of it is, well, are they screwing anything up? And if not, great, but maybe they're not actually doing all that much. But then it's odd because then they become 2nd and 3rd year players, and all of a sudden those same things that you weren't worried about at all when they were rookies, you start to worry about more when they're 2nd or 3rd year.
I'm not going to have this become Patrick Williams slander, KP, because it's going to be 2031, and I'm going to be on this podcast being like, man, if Patrick Williams just starts to shoot a little more, he's going to really figure it out. Like, the body type is there. Blah, blah, blah. I'm never giving up on Patrick Williams. What Jeff Green is to Ryan Russillo, Patrick Williams is going to be to me.
Now I need to figure out who that guy is for me. But, not every story is like Patrick Williams. I will say there are a lot of cases like, look, Kevin Durant was in a similar situation where he didn't score that efficiently, is a rookie in Seattle, is, the go-to scorer on a team that was, more or less constructed to be bad at that point, in anticipation of the extended rebuild that would eventually pay off in Oklahoma City. And he was voted rookie of the year without much controversy. And that was obviously, like, from a historical standpoint, he was the best player in that draft class. The fact that Al Horford is kind of more of a role player in Atlanta, was more valuable as a rookie, didn't matter. And that's always kind of the central tension of this rookie of the year award, is how do you treat these players who are extremely talented, but are being overexposed early in their career? Because, even though Jalen, it's not just that Paolo Banchero's role is bigger than Jalen Williams. It's also that Jalen Williams spent 3 years in college. I think, if I might have been 2, but definitely more than 1, is older than Paolo Banchero. So all of those factors kind of, I think, go into the way that people talk about it. But it does make it extremely difficult to compare, especially, like, Jalen Williams is one thing, but you compare Paolo Banchero to Walker Kessler, who is a very relatively small part of the Utah offense, or the other numerical guy this year is Tari Eason, who rates quite well.
Tari Eason, I've seen him left off of all rookie second teams. He is a stone cold lock to appear on my all rookie second team, and I almost put him on my all rookie first team. He needs to be on one of the all rookie teams, probably the second team. Yeah, the worst thing about Walker Kessler, by the way, is that just when I thought we were done with hearing the Jazz people talk about screen assists, is we're gonna just get back to, hey, in like 3 years, it's like Walker Kessler, if you check the screen, another screen assist for Walker Kessler. He set a screen. I mean, it's important, but I just don't need to hear about it all the time because his usage rate is 12%. The good thing about Walker Kessler is, compared to his predecessor, he's got like soft hands and good touch, and he's going to do more stuff on offense so that maybe they don't have to just like trump up the screen assist thing, but he will finish third in my rookie of the year. But it's not like Jalen Williams is a wallflower. He's averaging 14 points a game on really efficient shooting. And in the last couple of months, it's been like 20 points a game. Now, I understand that the first couple of months also matter. I haven't decided who I'm voting for. I'm going to watch this Thunder game tonight closely because I'm not going to lie. If Jalen Williams continues to surge and like has a 35-point game and a must-win game for the Thunder, the Magic haven't played a must-win game in like 10 years. That might it's a little data point. It's a little data point. I just don't really get why we're not allowed to care about the shooting percentage. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely matters. And it's a thing that in the first month of the season, we were amazed at Paolo Banchero's efficiency because he was scoring more efficiently at that point than he had at Duke, which is not generally what's supposed to happen for guys that are playing that large roles offensively in the NBA. And the free throw rate has remained very strong. That's still good, but the shooting percentages from the field have slipped pretty dramatically since that hot start.
And let me say this so that the 24 Orlando Magic fans in Orlando, Florida, don't get mad at me. He was in my first 10 things of the whole year. That dude is going to be a monster for a long, long time and an all-star for a long, long time. He has it on offense. He can do everything pretty well. He's a really good passer. He's going to get better abusing mismatches. He's going to get better shooting threes. But the feel, the versatility, the scoring, the ability to get to the line, like he's got it. And he's a better defender than I thought he would be based on all the stuff that was sort of based on the pre-draft reputation. Like he's smart. He moves his feet pretty well. He's not a shot blocker, but he takes charges. He's aware. He makes the right rotations. Like I'm a huge Paolo Banchero fan.
The other thing I want to say, I understand why you're stereotyping me as a Walker Kessler voter. My actual stereotype is Paolo Banchero voter because I'm from Seattle, and like my grandparents, sadly, they're no longer with us to confirm this, but we're pretty sure that they like knew his grandparents.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Look at that.
So it's a relatively small, the Italian American community in Seattle.
I guess I typecast you because among the people I ask about these awards are analytics people who work for teams, and their response like unanimously is how are you even debating this? It's Walker Kessler. Like, it's Walker Kessler by a mile. It's Walker Kessler and then everyone else. I'm like, is it like really? I don't know. I disagree with you people. Sorry. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the East for just a little bit here. We are almost pretty much locked in to well, certainly 1-6 is almost stone cold locked in. Miami at 7 is a borderline cinch. 8 and 9 between the Raptors and the Hawks. The race that the whole world is talking about. It's leading CNN all day long today. Raptors Hawks for the 8-9 seeds, and the Bulls are at 10th. So I think we can probably preview, if the Hawks get the job done, which they should. We're going to have a Miami-Atlanta play-in game and a Toronto-Chicago play-in game as our first 2 play-in games. Which one do you want to talk about? Just a few minutes, because we may not even get these because the Hawks will probably crap the bed and threaten this whole structure, but they have the tiebreaker over the Raptors. All they got, their magic number is 1 to make this happen.
Just a lot of red in the logos in the East play-in is what stands out to me. Let's start Raptors Bulls, because Heat Hawks we saw in the first round last year. Obviously, some different pieces in Atlanta in particular.
Okay, so Raptors Bulls, the Raptors have the season series 2-1. Only one has happened since the trade deadline. Really just an unappealing stylistic matchup. The 2 teams who can't shoot straight. And it's not going to be fun to watch. We do get the DeRozan revenge factor, which is kind of fun. And if you're gonna, I would favor Toronto at home if they will be at home if this game does in fact take place. But if you're gonna beat Toronto, other than hoping they just miss all their shots, it helps to be able to control the possession game. Toronto wins by controlling the possession game, and the Bulls are 6th in forcing turnovers, thanks largely to Alex Caruso, who will be on one of my all defense teams. 3rd in defensive rebounding. The Raptors are an enormously powerful offensive rebounding team, so you got to protect the glass. And their starting 5, although small, with Pat Beverly, Caruso, Levine, DeRozan as the 4, and Vooch has an incredible defensive rebounding rate. And they're 9th in turnover rate on offense, i.e. they don't turn it over a lot. So they have the possession game largely on lock. Obviously, Toronto will have a say in that. And the flip side is, well, we'll talk about a couple flip sides, but the other way to beat Toronto is they give up a lot of threes. They contest them pretty well, but they give up a lot of threes. And the Bulls, God bless them, they don't take a lot of threes and they don't make a lot of threes.
This feels like it's a Zach LaVine matchup because, without having remembered off the top of my head Raptors Bulls matchups or dug into any of the videotape, like the upside of the Raptors defensively is they have a lot of guys with size that they can put on DeMar DeRozan. It's going to be hard for him to play bully ball against them. He can, probably get his way to the free throw line, but I think that playing a Levine centric style is probably more favorable for Chicago in this matchup than a DeRozan centric style.
Well, to your point, obviously Toronto can flip the matchups however they wanted, but they have often guarded Levine with Fred VanVleet, who's much shorter than Levine, but very pesky and good at getting through screens. They have largely guarded DeRozan with OG Anunoby, which just is incredibly unpleasant to even think about what it's like to have OG Anunoby guarding you. And one of the things they do with DeRozan and the Bulls is not only will they put Anunoby on him, if it's a DeRozan, Vucevic pick and roll or whoever pick and roll, they'll have the defender on the screener, whether it's Pirtle or whoever, come really high up to the level of the screen to take away DeRozan's mid-range game. He's not walking into mid-range jumpers against the Raptors like he is for other teams, and they'll help behind that so Vooch doesn't get a clean catch on the roll or whatever, and basically dare the Bulls supporting players, almost none of whom are good shooters other than Levine, to beat them with threes, and betting that they won't beat them with threes either by choice or by missing. So that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. I guess I'd pick. I can't get into banking picks. It's just like one game. Anything can happen in one game. If Levine has 45 points, the Bulls will win. But it's an interesting matchup. Anything else you want to talk about with that?
Yeah, I mean, the answer in terms of picks is probably whoever has home court advantage, but that's not super interesting.
Miami, Atlanta, or I'm sorry, Miami, Atlanta in the 7-8 game. The teams that will be in double elimination. Look, I think that's a juicy game because one of the big reasons that DeJounte Murray is on the Hawks and all the draft picks and stuff is in San Antonio is because in the playoffs last season, Miami threw the kitchen sink at Trae Young, and the Hawks had nothing in response. No one else who could make them pay off the dribble. Trae Young wilted under all the pressure that the Heat were throwing at him. And this season's matchup has been largely the same. It's 3-1 Miami, and you know what you're going to get. They're going to blitz Trae Young, pressure Trae Young. Caleb Martin's actually done a pretty good job on Trae Young in select matchups. And Jimmy Butler is going to find Trae Young on every single possession when it really matters and try to grind this game into an ugly, brute force, half-court game where the Heat's offense, which is like 25th in the NBA, can put up enough points to win. And that formula has been successful against Atlanta. I think everyone will just kind of assume it's going to be a Heat walkover. And every time you get a matchup like that, where you just kind of, yeah, we've seen that before. I get a little nervous because the Hawks, now DeAndre Hunter's been out. The Hawks have talent. Like, they have a lot of talent, and they're a pretty good team. I think it's actually kind of, I understand they had a coaching change, so this whole year just feels like a trial balloon, but like, show up against the nemesis that embarrassed you last year, and let's see what you got, because I think they can win that game.
Also, notably, they have won 3 games in a row for the first time since, before this entire streak of them never being more than 1 game away from.
Were any of them against the Wizards? I feel like the Hawks play the Wizards 17 times a year.
One of them was against the Wizards because they played the Wizards. That was their most recent one. They played the Wizards 3 times in the past month.
I just feel like something's wrong with the NBA schedule. The Hawks Wizards play 17 times a year. What else about that game? Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really the test of what difference DeJounte Murray makes for the reasons you laid out. Like, I started out with we've seen this before, but as you point out, the Murray trade was the response to that. And of course, there's a different coach with Quinn Snyder on the sidelines, and how much he's actually been able to shift things at this point is still remains to be seen. But it is a different matchup than it was before. And Miami, I think they're one of those teams that they were kind of East Coast Warriors, and that everyone was like, well, eventually the run is just going to come, right? And it still hasn't really come, and instead it's kind of heading the other direction, heading into the play-in.
Yeah, I don't see it with Miami this year, especially if they end up having to play Boston or Milwaukee in the first round. Chris Middleton got hurt last night in the Bucks game. He left after the first substitution with re-aggravation of his right knee. I've heard so far that there's not a lot of concerns about him missing time, so let's pencil him into the first round. Maybe he'll miss a week or 10 days or something, but let's pencil him into the first round. They don't have the vibe of a team that can get it together the way that the Warriors have the vibe of a team that can get it together. But we'll see. The Heat are dangerous. We know the Heat are dangerous. I wouldn't just look past them, but I don't see it this year. And the last East series that we have set in something like stone is Philly-Brooklyn. And can I just say how angry I am that of all the possible iterations of Philadelphia-Brooklyn, this is the one we are getting? Ben Simmons is injured. James Harden is gone. Kyrie Irving is gone. Kevin Durant is gone. Philly is amazing. This is the series last year, had it happened, where I would have been at every single game, soaking it all up. And now we get this? What a bummer. Now, the Nets are fine, and they're frisky and, whatever. They played once since the trade deadline. It was a close game. Spencer Dinwiddie actually hit a game-tying 3 that was waved off because it was after the buzzer. Just feels like such a letdown. Such a letdown. Oh,
I mean, I'm actually relieved because, look, Twitter is a pretty fragile place right now. Had Sixers Nets happened with Ben Simmons in the lineup and Durant and Kyrie still in Brooklyn, that the takes had the potential to break Twitter and possibly take down the entire internet infrastructure with them. So maybe it's a relief from that standpoint that this will be a decidedly less takey series. I think it'll be interesting to see what Mikal Bridges looks like as a go-to guy in a playoff setting where a team is preparing for him over multiple games, adjusting to him, that sort of thing, because that's a level of challenge that he has not yet faced in that role.
Yeah, they have wings to throw at Harden and Maxey, like defensively, they have a bunch of wings. Okay. Embiid is going to eat in this, like Nick Claxton, God bless him. He's had a great season. He's an all defensive candidate, most improved candidate. He's given up a lot of weight and muscle to Joel Embiid. And the Nets know that, and they're going to have to scheme around it and test his passing, as we talked about earlier. Can I give you a little bit of Brooklyn Nets trivia?
Okay.
Really exciting stuff, Kevin. Day'Ron Sharpe, Brooklyn's backup center. You may have heard of him. You probably have heard of him.
I watched him play at Carolina a little bit with the Nets.
Didn't know that he went to Carolina. I just learned something. He passed 500 minutes played last night in the Nets, whatever. I think they beat the remnants of the Detroit Pistons. And that's significant to me because among all players in the history of the NBA who have played 500 minutes in any season ever, Day'Ron Sharpe, is now on pace for the highest offensive rebounding rate in basketball history. He has rebounded 21.4% of Brooklyn's misses while on the floor, which would top all the Moses Malone seasons, all the Dennis Rodman seasons, all the recorded rebounding seasons in the history of basketball for players who have played 500 minutes in a season, which is by loose, like this, you were like a participant in the NBA season if you crack 500 minutes. That has no bearing on anything in the Sixers series. I just thought it was funny.
That is interesting. Look, he's going to have to play. They're going to have to use multiple bigs to defend.
Yes, they're going to have major problems defending Joel Embiid. I'm just so bummed. It was such a spicy. It was the spiciest possible series.
I mean, think of what we potentially gained if it's Suns Warriors or Suns Clippers. So that's how you have to view it.
Now, Cleveland Knicks, I haven't brought up here because that I'm going to really dive deeper into. I'm going to watch a lot of film on that and think hard about that. I'll do the same for Sixers Nets, but I just wanted to I brought it up just to share my frustration about how the series has gone about. Cleveland Knicks, so I'm going to dive in. I'm going to watch Donovan Mitchell's pick and rolls against the Knicks and watch, Brunson stuff and Randall stuff. Knock on wood, Randall is healthy enough to play in the series. Do you have any initial thoughts on the Donovan Mitchell Bowl?
Yeah, this came up on the Hoop Collective podcast earlier this week with Dave McMenamin and Nick Friedel were on there, and I was surprised that there wasn't much discussion of Tom Thibodeau's recent playoff track record, which is not been great. Now, fortunately, they are not the higher seed in this series, which has tended to go well for Thibodeau's teams. But there is an element where their diligence and their keeping guys on the court in the regular season has just not translated the same way when you get to the grind of a playoff setting. And I think going up against a Cleveland team that, look, these are three games apart in the standings, but point differential, even though the Knicks are fully legit this year, Cleveland is number 2 in the entire NBA. I feel pretty confident in Cleveland's chances, and also the chances that this will be thrown back in my face by Knicks fans if they indeed win the series.
I don't make picks until I sit down and watch some film and get a better feel for, how the matchups will take place and who goes. So much of playoff series really is who can guard who. It all stems from there. If you don't have someone who can guard that guy X, then you got to adjust. And this is all, I got to dig in a little bit, but I do just I do worry about the Knicks offense against Cleveland's defense. It's just, Brunson has been amazing and Randall has been amazing and their offense has been amazing all season. I just worry about Cleveland's defense grinding them to dust in the half court. On the other hand, I worry about this Isaac Okoro lingering injury for Cleveland, and any lineup that has 2 of Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens, Okoro, Osman, I start to get a little nervous about life for the Cavs and about defenses forcing the ball to places where they want it to go. But those 4 top guys are so goddamn good that, we didn't talk about all NBA, and particularly all NBA guards and forwards, which after the first team, I'm having a lot of trouble with. I don't want to spoil too many of my choices, but I think the 3 absolute locks for all NBA guard are Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Donovan Mitchell, and despite all the crap in Dallas, Luka Doncic. And to Portland fans who are saying, what about Damian Lillard? Let's just say Damian Lillard has a very strong case to be an all-NBA player. No one talks about Darius Garland. Nobody, because he's the number 2 guard on Cleveland. So I get it. If you're picking 6 guards or really going to pick 2 Cavs, I get it. You stack his numbers up, advanced, traditional, however you want to do it, against any of these other dudes. Now, not necessarily Lillard because he averaged 32 points a game, but his team stinks and he's played 58 games. Not Curry, who is Curry and has played 54 games, but he's Steph Curry. But you stack him up against the other guys, he might be becoming the most underrated. He might be taking the Drew Holiday mantle as most underrated guard in the NBA.
Well, I suppose it depends whether Drew Holiday makes all NBA this year in his own right, since he's got a pretty good case too.
He has a very good case.
Yeah. I have Dame 4th among the guards. Same top 3 as you. Haven't decided between Luka and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for that second spot on the first team. But by the way,
wait. Does that mean Donovan Mitchell is locked into the first spot on the first team?
I have him ahead of Shai at this point. Yeah.
Ooh, I have SGA. So my minor spoiler right now, my first team. And again, the Dallas stuff is one that is going to go down to the wire. Just like I mentioned, Jalen Williams, Rookie of the Year. Like Dallas is still playing for stuff. But right now, my first team guards are SGA and Donovan Mitchell. I'm bumping Luka as of now, Thursday, April 6th at 6:28 Eastern. I'm bumping, which is a sentence I didn't think I would say. I'm bumping Luka Doncic to second team.
It's understandable. Yeah. I don't see a lot of separation between those 3 guys. I think they're all in the same tier.
Rarely do I say like old school sports. That's actually not true. Sometimes I do. I don't think you can make first team all NBA on a bad team. And the Mavs just aren't a good team. They're going to finish not like 1 game below 500 or 2 games below 500. They're going to finish. Well, we'll see what they finish. They could finish actually 2 games below 500. They could finish 40 and 42. You can't make first team all NBA on a 40 and 42 poop team.
I think it's more that the struggles in the back half of the season have had some things to do with Luka Doncic and his penchant for technical fouls. He's avoided, another suspension thanks to the rescinding of his most recent technical foul and hasn't gotten one since then. But that element of it, he just has not been the same player down the stretch. So I think you can make it on a 40 and 42 team, but Luka is probably not the right guy for that to be the poster child of that argument.
We're talking about Garland. I think you had some thoughts on Garland, and you had 4 guards locked in. Then you have Lillard as a lock.
I do have him as a lock, and I think Steph might be the next guy up for me, which would. I was going to say
that the logical conundrum you come in if you're going to lock in Dame is how do you not lock in Steph, because their numbers are pretty similar. I think we all agree Steph's a better player, and the games played is going to finish pretty close to even. So that's it's hard to put one on without the other.
So I was surprised how well Garland came out, kind of combining the all-in-one numbers that I looked at. And one of the aspects of that I think is interesting to dig into is he comes out as an above average defender in the consensus. And that seems to me like it's probably a function of the team he's on and the scheme he's in more than it is Darius Garland's merits as an individual defender.
I will say part of Cleveland's defense begins with those 2 big guys, Mobley and Allen, who are amazing. The level of buy-in, effort, and schematic execution from guards who until this season were not regarded as good defensive players, Donovan Mitchell, Karis LeVert, and Darius Garland, has been really, really a pleasant surprise of the season. Those guys have been grinding, denying passing lanes, getting around screens, being physical, the hard work of defense. They've done it all season, which is part of the reason why I don't know where he will land, but he is going to be on my ballot. JB Bickerstaff is going to be on my Coach of the Year ballot. He's gotten absolutely no buzz in the Coach of the Year race. He's like the 11th name that you hear. I think he belongs in serious consideration I mean, Mike Brown is going to win, and Mike Brown deserves to win. But after that, I think JB Bickerstaff has as good of a dossier as any coach in the NBA this year.
I haven't looked at that one either. I think the four names for my ballot would probably be those two, Mark Daigneault, and then I think Will Hardy deserves some recognition for the fact that Utah is getting career years from so many guys.
Kevin Pelton, any parting thoughts? Anything you're looking forward to or just watching carefully in these last couple of games? Or are you just wake me up at the play-in?
I'm not going to wake me up at the play-in. It'll be hard the next couple of nights because we have these Hoop Summit practices conflicting with some of the games and have to try to follow both of them. And then the actual game will be on Saturday night. But if we do get a scenario for shenanigans like that, I will be tuned in for sure.
And we do get Denver Suns tonight as the late national TV game, which we'll see how many of the Denver players we get. But I think the Suns need these games to just sort of get where they want to go. So that's interesting. Kevin Pelton, what are we going to see from you next week? Are we going to see awards columns? Are we going to see playoff preview columns? Are we going to see Hoop Summit columns? What should we look for?
We don't have anything specific on the docket, except I am in all likelihood writing about Aaliyah Boston. She is the presumptive number one pick of the WNBA draft next Monday.
And congratulations to LSU on winning the national championship in kind of a letdown title game. I was really excited to watch a wire-to-wire game, but it was a little bit, but not a letdown for LSU. They were awesome.
Yeah, it was an awesome, terrific shot making from them.
Yeah, Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, all things basketball. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.